and you're gonna drive the car. There are probably some other challenges. Come talk to me in the evening. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next. Yes.
So you, as a sort of delivery of the websites, embrace DevOps. What about your internal IT department and your machines? Are they embracing DevOps as well?
Yes, they are. So we're split so that we have the e-commerce engineering side of tech, and we have the internal IT networks, internal IT services, that sort of stuff. Don't do that, anyway. So that side of things was behind the e-commerce, so we migrated, and then later on they looked at what we'd done and migrated incrementally themselves. Some of their stuff is less sophisticated than ours, but they're catching up all the time because we're talking to them about what we do, and they're talking to us about, well, how do we do this? How did you solve this problem? For example, at the moment, they don't bake dependencies onto AMIs. They do everything at bootstrap time. But on the other hand, most of their servers are much longer lived. I should have mentioned, in the e-commerce production environment, we don't have a domain, because that would really slow things down and be quite a lot of effort for not much reward. In our opinion, your context is probably your context. In ours, it didn't make sense. We do have an internal computing domain because they need to enforce things like group policies and that sort of thing. So yes, they are very much embracing the cloud as we are. You both went up at the same time. If you can decide amongst yourselves.
Have you started to look at Nano Server to improve your
Yeah, I've heard about Nano Server. That sounds compelling. That sounds like it might boot in much shorter amounts of time. I'm also quite excited to hear that it's finally getting a native SSH implementation, because WS remoting is odd. So yeah, I'm aware of that, but we don't really beta test Microsoft stuff. We don't really use it ahead of when it's actually released, and maybe even not then. Some of the coding stuff we do, but not really the infrastructure stuff, because it seems to take a while for that to settle after releases. So we avoid that. Although we might look at the next version of Windows Server if there's an Amazon provided AMI before actually launching a beta one. Did that answer the question? Sorry. Yes.
I'm interested in how you moved to the cloud. Was it a big bang migration? Was it a sort of a hybrid approach? And are there any learnings that you can share in terms of how you did that?
I mentioned that we're multi-tenant. Each tenant is a country. We took the smallest country at the time, where there are about, I don't know, 10 customers and 3 restaurants, and treated that essentially like our own personal test environment for 6 months. We took our smallest country, and we learned how to do things like, CloudFormation as a start, how the security groups would work, write the infrastructure automation. We didn't go totally templated to begin with. It was hand-rolled CloudFormation, so the templating came later. And per country, we had a period where some stuff was in the cloud and some stuff was still back home in the data center. Typically, the SQL Server would move last. So we maintained a trombone of VPN from the DK data center to the Ireland cloud, because there wasn't a direct connection back in those days. And that worked well enough. In fact, in the quarter in 2013, in the first quarter that we did the migration, we had our highest recorded uptime to that date, which is probably a fluke, but it's a nice talking point. So yeah, we did it bit by bit, and country by country.
Hi. Could you elaborate a bit on what's available? Sorry. Could you elaborate a bit on what's available to the developers to actually debug live problems without using remote desktop?
So you can write logs that are useful. You can inject monitoring at the seams. You can inject logging at the seams. But this requires that you have reasonably loosely coupled code. So that OO thing, those interfaces, you want to be using decorator pattern or aspect-oriented programming or clever inversion of control container configurations to turn stuff on or off. So your diagnostics telemetry is there, but just turned off until you need it. One of the things we would absolutely love is if more of the logging frameworks would have a way in a website of log everything to a buffer, and then at the end of the buffer, if something went wrong, then dump everything to the sinks. If nothing went wrong, then just log the sort of higher level stuff, so you get to have your cake and eat it. So we encourage people to log structured events rather than impossible to parse strings with data embedded into them, because who likes writing regular expressions in an incident? We encourage people to stat at the process boundaries at least. We wrote an HTTP module that will publish the statsd, at least the response time of each HTTP operation broken down by the operation name, the verb, and the response code. So we can then have reasonably data-driven SLA-type alerts. So this operation is known to not take more than 200 milliseconds, so that is our alert. Now we will get no worse than that, and we'll know when we do. So those sorts of techniques are what we do. At the back in the blue.
What tools do you use to manage application performance at JustEat?
So we do have profilers, but we find that we don't tend to use them unless we've already noticed in our monitoring things get slow. I mentioned that we run fake load. We do that so that we don't have to bottleneck through a performance test environment and a performance test before going to production, because everyone's deploying all of the frigging time. That makes that unworkable. So we use statsd, graphite, grafana, and sarin for the performance aspects of monitoring. And then each cog, each component, has a set of alerts. So some of them are resource-oriented, like CPU, memory, garbage collection. Some of them are business-focused, like number of logins per second, number of orders per minute, that sort of thing. And when those change from expected, and here the different teams are differently sophisticated with what does good look like. When those change from expected, then we know that triggers some optimization work. And we do it like that. And it's a very easy argument to make to product management to say we need to do some optimization work because look, there's a chart. At the back.
Yeah, I was just curious to know what you do regarding your database infrastructure in terms of the development here. Do you have like central development databases? Do you allow a developer to spin up their own instance of the database, or is it even right down at the level of their workstation?
So at the moment, it's not really possible to start environment name Pete, for example. That's not really quite possible. Instead, each team tends to have two environments. They tend to use one for their continuous deployment of master, and they tend to use one for their spelunking around during development type work. So it is a shared database model, and sometimes that treads on people's toes, but mostly that doesn't tend to happen because we mock away at the process boundaries in our C# based tests. We're finding more that rather than writing classical unit tests where you have a suite of tests per class, we're writing tests per API operation or per event reaction. So we mock away at the process boundaries, not at the class boundaries. That exercises the whole stack, back, up, down and back. And so because we have decent logging, or increasingly decent logging I should say, it's not everywhere, that allows you in a test to not need to start debugging because you'll be able to read the logs, just like you would in production. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Well, partially.
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. It was more this time because, as you know, we're facing very similar problems in having a monolithic central database and sort of like running this case of like doing this splitting it up job, maybe using different technologies. for anybody from Microsoft in the room to get away from Microsoft SQL Server licensing issues, right? Right, yeah, whistle, whistle. But there's real challenges there when you come to, because you're making very, very destructive changes to the database, and
So-
we're getting pressures from the devs to like give them their own copy.
So we're finding that fewer and fewer changes have to happen to the monolith via the migrations. When they do get changed, then there's a source control and CI record of when they get changed. And so that just leaves data. And data's always kind of going to be a problem. What some of the teams are trying out is that proxy-based approach. That's been in our system for about 18 months. And other teams are starting to get the components to actually host static data so that you can ask for, you can make an API request and add a specific header to say which scenario you want the static data back. So that means your components ship with test data and you have a test mode, so your tests can run everywhere. That shows some benefits as well. But yeah, you do have the problem of the SQL Server. We haven't solved that. Anyone else solved that?
Oracle? Oh, Troll. Right. Thank you very much for an awesome presentation, Peter. Much appreciated.